Welcome to the podcast, fellow griever. I'm Melissa, your host, and I'm with you on this journey because my own incredible 21-year-old son, Alex, died by suicide on August 7th in 2016. My world was shattered, but slowly, bit by bit, I began the difficult journey of rebuilding a new life, just like you may be doing right now. So know that I see you, because I am you. Thank you so much for being here. It truly means more than I can say. And if you are new to the podcast, please consider listening to the introduction, Meet Me, episode number 1, which is now linked in the show notes starting in late season 6. Listen to know what to expect from the podcast, to learn more about me, and so that you will know all that I offer in my community for support, connection, and healing. If you are not a new listener and haven't listened to this Meet Me episode recently, it's updated and you may learn something new. Every week, we will continue to explore the questions that haunt us, seek the courage to uncover the healing tools within us, and offer the comfort of a community we all need so very much. Come along with me, because this is so very lonely, but we do not have to be alone. Together, let's choose to find meaning and even happiness amid the leftover pieces before us. Welcome to today's episode. Hello, fellow griever, and welcome to Season 6, Episode 46. And today I'm sharing an incredible conversation that I had not so long ago with a father named Larry Carlat. Larry's a writer, he's an author, he's a retired editor, he's a grief coach, and he's a bereaved father. He's the bereaved father of Rob, his son who died by suicide. And this is life after suicide, all packed into a full of lived experience, wisdom, and hope-filled conversation that I'm honored to have you be here to be a part of. One of the chapters in his books is called The Soul Knows When It's Time to Go. And you get to listen to us discuss that and synchronicities and our kids being connected to other parents through their deceased kids. You get to hear us talk about hopelessness and hopefulness and so much more. Oh, and we both lean into the idea of choices as being a big part of this journey, especially after the first year. His book, A Space in the Heart, is an incredible read, and it's an even better helper on this way to making it through day by day, or as I say, now that I'm in Puerto Rico, poco a poco. He breaks down his book into 3 bites. Part 1 is the end of your life as you know it. Part 2 is the middle, or the moving through all of these griefy bits. And part 3, he calls the beginning, and it's the beginning of creating this new life after. So yeah, as you can see, there's a lot of commonalities between my approach to life after loss, my experience to life after loss, and his as well. And he reads several parts of this incredible book during this episode, including one called We Are Extraordinary Parents. And I hope you'll stay to the end, because he also reads parts of you and finishes with something called a little reminder at the very end, which isn't the actual end. You know you will want to read this book over and over again once you have your hands on it. And we do spend some time talking about his one-on-one grief coaching called Grief for Guys, and his involvement with a local place in the Los Angeles area. And of course, we talk about his book, among other things. I think you'll just absolutely adore this conversation. I think it's got something for everyone, whether you're a parent, a child, a supporter, or any other griever of suicide loss. I think there are nuggets for you, not only in this conversation, but absolutely in this book, which I can't wait to get to the beach and finish it. So, Griever, I'm really glad that you've joined me for this one today. Let's go ahead and get started and dive right in. Hi, Larry. Welcome to the podcast. It is my pleasure to have you today, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Pleasure to be here with you.
Well, I would like to start off by asking you the same thing that I ask all of the people that come on my podcast, which is to share your lost story, whatever that means to you.
Yeah, let's start at the end. My son Rob took his own life 6 years ago. Rob was suffering from bipolar disorder. He was depressed. He was an alcoholic. He had conflicted feelings about being adopted. We adopted him from birth. And what I like to say about Rob is that he was a pain in the ass who was deeply loved by many. And I've never loved anyone the way I loved Rob. And it was because Rob needed it more than anyone I've ever known. So I have a younger son who I deeply love, and that love is the most natural love I've ever experienced. But Rob was very needy. And yeah, and I miss him every day. So that's the short version of it. We can get into the longer parts later.
Yeah, we absolutely can. And thank you for sharing that. I look forward to getting into more bits and pieces and getting to know Rob a little bit better. Because if you're like me at all, we love to talk about our kids. Enough people don't ask us or give us space for it. And I always love to lean into hearing about other kids. So
You know what? I was
Go
just
ahead.
saying, you spurred something. If I can talk about Rob for another half a second,
Please.
because Rob really was a pain in the ass. He was very difficult, and we went through some catastrophic things with him from right from the get-go, from the time he was born till the day that he died. And I choose not to revisit those things. I choose not to talk about those things because I lived them and relived them. And I did 10,000 expert hours on Rob. So now when I talk about Rob and when I think about Rob, it's all the good that's in him. I only talk about the good. I only talk about his essence when I talk to him, and I do talk to him every day. But I don't necessarily like going back and talking about all the shitty times that we had together, if that makes any sense.
It makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, I even look at it as when I heard you say that, I thought I have a living child who I've have a lot of struggles with and have been that 10,000 miles. And I think there's probably going to be some more because she's living. And I know what you're saying about we've been there, done that, washed ourselves in it, rinsed it off, done it, rinse and repeat and go over again. And while not denying that, you're not denying that was there to celebrate his life. And I love the word essence, the essence of who he was. Is such a nice tribute to everything that he left behind, his legacy, right? And that's what talking about them and leaning into their life and the good that was their life really helps us do. And I know you've done a lot of that. Take me back, if you will. We started at the end, but take me back to the time preceding. Was this the most surprise thing that could happen, or was this something that you struggled with a lot of worrying about whether this was going to be an outcome?
The latter. I used to say that when I got the phone call, it was a shock, but it wasn't a surprise. I'd been waiting that phone call for the better part of his adult life. And anytime the phone rang previous to that, and if it was late at night, one of those horrible phone calls, my heart would just jump out of my chest. So it was not a surprise. Rob had been suicidal a number of times. And each one of those times previously, he would reach out and he would say he was in a bad way, or he would threaten. There were times where I took him to the emergency room and we had him go for psych evals. This time, I had lunch with Rob the day before he killed himself, and I did not have a clue. So he did not want me to intervene. I did not know, and I literally got a phone call the next day that he had taken his own life. But it was not a surprise at all. When Rob was a very little boy, he was depressed. And so I've written this book. It's called The Space in the Heart. And that phrase comes from something he said when he was like 4 years old. He said, I have a space in my heart that never closes. And that was when he was a little boy. I mean, it was poetry, but he was depressed and difficult and also funny as hell and really smart and a great hang, except for if something triggered him, he would turn into another person.
Yeah. Wow. What a lot to take in, especially the fact I love that backstory. I don't know if I'm sure you tell that somewhere in the book, but that's quite a thing to have taken that from him. I've talked about it briefly before, but the name The Leftover Pieces came from a similar thing after Alex died. When I got to the place of thinking of starting the podcast, which was more than 3 years in, and that started a whole journey for me into this is about our leftover pieces. So it's about what we choose to do with them. I didn't get to choose the way that this went down. And in my opinion, Alex didn't completely either. That's another discussion for another day, but it is what happened. And so, yeah, it was about what I did with the leftover pieces, and we get to choose to do that. But so to hear you say that was something that Rob said as a little boy, and that stuck with you, right? It stuck with you for a reason, which is interesting too.
Yeah. He also just said something that I feel the same way about, and that is I felt Rob was with me as I was writing the book. When I do readings, I tell people you can't see him, but Rob is right here with me. And I've also felt that he has downloaded certain things to me. And I don't know about you, but before Rob died, I didn't believe in any of this woo-woo stuff at all. I was a total cynic and an agnostic. And after he died, I became a believer in almost everything. Why? Because it makes me feel good and provides incredible comfort. So, and it's so interesting to me because I hear this from bereaved parents all the time, how we're so connected to our child and we do feel that they're still communicating with us all the time.
It's funny you said all that, because while I also think that I would probably almost call myself a non-believer in any of that stuff too, Alex was a ghost hunter for a while. He thought it was fun. He was into some of the shows that were out and different things. And so him and I were the two in the family that even liked all those kind of things. We had that in common, as to where my other kids were like, let's not watch that, or no, I'm not going on a ghost hunt with you and Alex or whatever. And so it stands to reason that he would be the kid that would teach me that, hey, I'm still here, mom. Knock, I'm still here. But so I believed in it on a level of I knew there was a spirit world. I would have called myself an atheist. Well, I did for a very long time. I'm not sure I would call myself, I'm like you, to hear you say the words, a believer in everything, really is more encompassing of how I feel like I land now, because I know that there's something else out there. And yes, my son helped solidify that. It has opened up me understanding that my dad was always there. My grandparents were always there. I just wasn't open to paying attention. I had liked shiny rocks and things as a little child, but abandoned all that as a grown up, and have gone back to that place of understanding the power of, I tend to be more logical minded. So it's easy for me to go into the science of why some of the woo woo makes sense. But I also decided that the more evolved we become, the more we're willing to open ourselves up to the mysteries of the universe. And that includes other dimensions, which in my opinion includes where energy eternally lives and our kids are at. And you're right. I see it over and over again too. Some people that were believers, not believers, whatever, but I see them shift all the time into this space. And well, we now are not parenting just on one side of the veil. We have one foot and part of our heart on the other side, and always will until we're there. And so it's just so interesting because, yeah, I absolutely have downloads from spirit now, and I accept them and know what they are. Where before I was like, where did that come from? Like, you would just blame it as, oh, I had a random thought or things that happen. There are coincidences in life for sure, but there's also a lot more things in life that are not quite the coincidence we think they are. in my opinion. So
What I'd like to say about that is that I help bereaved parents here on Earth and as a grief coach, and I run grief groups at a place called Our House Grief Support Center in Los Angeles. But I also like to think that Rob is helping, or Rob is with the children of who I'm helping. And I feel that. And it's that also just such an extraordinary thing, because in a million years, I didn't see myself as someone who was going to be a healer, nor did I ever see Rob in that capacity either. And now here we are, both helping from both sides.
these things are not accidents. I know you probably reached out to, I'm not by any means the only person you've reached out to talk about your book, but I feel so connected. I hear you saying so many things that I say. You use the word calling, and I've never used the word calling in my entire life until the work I do now, because to me, when you hear that, it harkens to cultural Christianity or religion. People say I've called to the priesthood or whatever. And I was an executive chef and spent a lot of time being really thankful that I had a career I loved, that I was good at, all those things. And yet I would have never called it a calling. Like, it was a desire. It was something I pursued. It was something I was good at and liked, but it wasn't a calling. And a calling is something that when you get out of bed every single day, doesn't matter whether you're making money, not making money, whatever the case is, you have a drive to do it. I can sit at my desk some days way, way too long into the night because I don't feel that need to go, okay, when is my day going to be over? Because I have more to do and I have more people to affect. And to hear you talk about grievers and their child being with you. I said that to somebody the other day. So all of my community members that are listening to this podcast will be like, yep, she says that all the time. But I no longer am afraid to tell new members of the community, your child brought you here. My child and some of the community children are the reason you're here. Believe that your child is the reason you have found my community, because your child has found our children. They have formed their own community and they are helping bring you here. And for the most part, it almost unequivocally, everybody leans into that, because they many times have told me stories, Larry, of, I don't know how I even found your community. I've had people say the podcast started playing out of nowhere and they didn't even, they don't listen to podcasts. I've heard people say, somebody handed me something in public and it had your thing on it, but I don't know why they did. Or, I mean, I've heard all sorts of weird things. And I'm like, because this is where you are being directed.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm also, again, I live out in Los Angeles, which is a little bit land, but I do believe where the universe is working and doing things for us, that I've seen it and I've felt it. And again, before I would say, what the hell is that? But I always say, you know what? The universe works in really strange, amazing ways, and things feel predestined. And I see it play out every day.
Well, predestined makes me think of synchronicity, because I'm not sure I would have ever believed in some of that stuff earlier. But I absolutely, like when you say Rob was little and he said, there's a place in my heart that doesn't ever close, that gave me chills. I had the hair stand on the back of my neck, because it made me think about there seems to, and I see it. I don't know what age he was then. Do you know?
He was
Approximately.
4.
Okay.
So he was crazy.
So I see these things happen from about age 8 under consistently. So there's something that happens around 7 or 8. I think we probably start to beat it out of them and they no longer want to believe the things that they feel or trust their intuition. We put doubt in them. We put, don't think that. You're not talking to your uncle that's dead or whatever. Stop thinking that, because a lot of kids are open and they don't even realize they're acknowledging like their own experiences. Alex, I'm looking back to artwork he had, all sorts of things at that time frame that are synchronicities that tell me his soul knew, even though he didn't, because he's left me crumbs that I now go, oh my gosh, of course. Like, I'm still getting them. Like, there's some of them are still coming to fruition of realizing it all has happened around that same age. There was something about that age that, even though I don't think he consciously knew, his soul knew that he needed to leave messages.
That's amazing you say that. One of the chapters in my book is called The Soul Knows When It's Time to Go. And it's a psychic medium told me that after a reading. And that had stayed with me ever since because I believe that Rob knew his time was up and he was suffering and he was in a lot of pain. And it was time. It was time to go. There was another thought that came up. You know what? Let's keep going.
Okay.
I don't want to go backwards. Let's go forward.
Yeah, I get it. And so we can talk about this in any order you want to, because this stuff isn't necessarily linear as far as the stuff we're going to talk about, because you've already mentioned our house grief center in LA. But I want you to talk about when this calling came about, because it didn't come about on day one. It's come about in the last 6 years, and you have since then. So kind of unpeel, going back to not early in Rob's life, but that time of post loss, and then how all of this came to be.
So one of the first things I did was I joined a grief group at our house as a griever. And one night, about a year into our meetings, and we met, it was a closed meeting and we met for 2 years, but a year in, one of the moms in the group said the following words, almost verbatim. She said, "I wish there was a guide or a manual or some sort of a book that will sort of help guide us through this journey." And I swear, I'm a writer and an editor. The light bulb went off at that moment, and I said, I'm going to write this book for her and for other parents like us. So that was the genesis of me writing. And then close to the ending of our group, 2 years in, I noticed that everyone in the group had undergone some sort of a transformation, including myself. And it was sort of the light coming back in our eyes, because as you walk into one of these groups, when you're freshly bereaved, you are the walking dead and you are hopeless and you are in the darkest place and in the most pain you've ever been in your life. After 2 years, some of that pain subsides and you start to see the light behind people's eyes. And you also notice a transformation because you are forever changed when you lose your child. And I saw this change just vividly one of these last nights. And that's when I got the calling. And I just said, I have to be part of this. I have to be part of helping people come back to life, because this transformation blew my fucking mind. It really, I mean, it was a head explosion.
Yeah.
And
it
that's
was like the little emoji with the exploding head. Yeah,
it was. But I knew at that moment that I had to do this and I wanted to do it. And the crazy thing is, not only is it the most rewarding thing that I've ever done, and it's like you think when you hear, oh, you're doing this, that's amazing. What you're doing a good deed. I get so much out of this. It helps my own healing. And I don't think people really understand how giving back and being of service actually helps you heal. So you're giving, but you're also taking, not in a selfish way, in a beautiful way. And I always say, I'm getting more out of this than they are by helping them.
I'm only laughing because you're stealing all my thunder. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a good way. People that are listening are going to be like, she says all those things too. I said that to somebody recently. I'm like, but it shows me the parallels of when somebody really is, because I speak to a lot of people. Many of them are called to different areas of help. Many of them are called to prevention or awareness or awareness of bullying or all sorts of different components. Some are called to help with addiction, if addiction was what was the downfall. So there's all sorts of places people are called. And I don't find people like me very often that are called to help the people left behind. And I know there's a lot of us out there. I'm just saying it's the lesser of the discussions I tend to have.
I agree with you.
Yeah. And I think that, that kind of makes sense. I can see, but I can't explain why I was called to what I was. It was just where my heart was. That's why I started the podcast. I said, I was listening to other podcasts and I found a couple that were specific to suicide loss, but they either were no longer recording. They'd only recorded a few. That's what happens to a lot of podcasters. They record a few and go, this is kind of hard.
Yeah.
And they stop. And it's not for them. And some that had been put out just as like a runner for a book that they were writing or something, but they never intended on going. So I had started listening to a gal that was just doing a basic grief podcasts that I really enjoyed, and she was compassionate, and I even did some things in her community. But at the time, she was like 30 years old and had lost her mother to cancer. So that was a complete disconnect. And that's when I said, I have to do something. And if it only helps one other mother, I'm going to be okay with that. I hadn't conceptualized the community, the books, any of that. I just knew I had to be a part of, like you said, a part of helping other people find a way through this that was hopeful. That was when the idea of, I started everything with the idea of survival, hope, and then healing, because we do see ourselves go through this kind of, it's not linear, but we see ourselves go through these phases. And it wasn't until these later years that I realized I then spent several years evolving. And now I've been in an integration period for a number of years where I'm kind of integrating it all in. But that's where I hear people say over and over again, how do I do this? How am I going to possibly survive this? And you say you're going to do this in community. You're going to do this with other people that know where you're at, and you're going to do it one step at a time. Here in Puerto Rico, they say poco a poco, right? But little by little.
Yeah. I use
that's how
that phrase too.
right? Because it is what it is. So I would love for you to keep going. I jumped in, but I want you to keep talking about the evolution of this for you and how all the things that you're doing came to be.
Yeah. And then, so from there, so two things happened. One is I started writing this book that came out a couple of months ago. And the second thing is I started to run groups for bereaved parents. And I also do some grief coaching at a website called Grief for Guys, and it's primarily for men. I also grief coach women, but the reason I did Grief for Guys is in our grief groups at our house, it's usually all women. There's usually one guy who's there because his wife dragged him there. And when it's time for him to share, he talks in monosyllables. And it was amazing to me where it's a sea of women at many of these groups. And guys just do not want to participate in a group setting. When I'm speaking to them one-on-one, guys have deep feelings, and they feel comfortable to share those feelings with me because I've been in their shoes. And we wind up, from the first session, I wind up crying with guys. So there's this whole misconception that guys don't want to show weakness and they don't want to cry. And I think it's weird in front of a whole bunch of people, but one-on-one, we have just as deep feelings as women, I think. I think some guys do have a hard time expressing those feelings.
Well, they haven't been taught to, Larry. I mean,
exactly.
The goodness truth is, especially our generation, we haven't been taught. We were not taught 100%. To do that. Our grandparents or parents either were boomers or what do they call it? The silent generation. They were one of those two generations or borderlined on them. And men were not talking about their feelings. That wasn't going to happen. And so I know. We're still the last generation that's kind of a product. I shouldn't say that because then our kids got a little bit of that from us, but we're watching these younger generations be so much more emotionally mature than we are, or that we were at that age. But you're right. I mean, I witnessed privately as much tenderness and emotion from my own husband as I would from me. But in a public setting, it is hard. And you're right. The men that get drugged to support group, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
I will tell you that even in the grief community, it is getting a little bit better, because I think back to the 4 years that I've been doing this, over 4 for the podcast, and I'm getting many more dads stepping up now than I did ever.
I hope it's changing. I hope it's changing a little bit.
It's not changing. If you're like me, it's not changing fast enough. Just Correct. Like other things aren't changing. People say, oh, well, I think we're coming a long way with I've heard people say that phrase. We're coming a really long way with mental health awareness. And I say, we're coming a little way. As I said, we're nowhere near where we should be as a society, given all the other advancements we have, that we still treat mental health and stuff the way we do. And even grief and suicide loss, we're way behind the curve in the Western world here with our very grief illiterate world that we live in.
Yeah, I agree. Also, I hear it all the time, like the stigma behind suicide. And it's like, what I say. I mean, I talk very freely about it and I'm very comfortable talking about it, but most people still get all squirrely. And most of the time particularly when I'm dealing with clients one-on-one, I spend most of my time normalizing their feelings. Whatever they're feeling, I tell them that's what you should be feeling. There's nothing wrong with it. There's no right way. There's no wrong way. And people who are isolated, people who, are not in grief groups or don't have people to share with, sometimes think they're going crazy.
Mhm.
And it feels that way
It
for
does.
sure. But going crazy is the norm when you lose your child, as we know.
It is. And you have that added complication of the way they died that has us oftentimes mired in the muck in the beginning. We're stuck in we're shooting all over
The
ourselves
guilt
with
and the
the guilt
blame, the
and the
whole
shame,
deal.
the blame shame game, because it's all we do in the beginning. I should have known. I should have. But I love that you call it a grief for guys. I think it's so empowering. And if you hold the groups and it's called grief for guys and women are there, do the guys say, why are there women here?
No, the Grief for Guys thing is
Is just
one-on-one.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
And
the one-on-one.
and then
Okay.
the groups are sometimes mixed, but primarily women.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So that I needed an understanding for the
Yeah,
groups.
yeah.
The groups are at our house, or you do those yourself, like on Zoom.
No, they're live groups. They're closed groups. As I said, the parent group these days runs 18 months. When I was there was for 2 years. And being with people who have suffered the same trauma that you have, there's an immediate bonding, there's an immediate shortcut. And these people become your friends, and you look forward to coming every other week and spilling your guts because it's the one safe place where you can do it. No one's judging you, maybe yourself, but no one else is judging you. And it feels good to be witnessed, and it also feels good to be totally understood. And you don't get that in any other place, rather, other than in a grief group. I mean, your friends who have not been through this, they love you and they're going to support you and they're there for you, but they can't possibly understand.
Right.
So that
That understanding piece is huge.
so that is the magic of being in a grief group. And I do think that's where you get to process a lot of your grief, and that's where you transform.
Yeah. I don't think I've really considered this before, but it feels like a little bit of a pushback, but it's for a good reason. So I want to push back on something just a little bit. One, I think it's really important to have in-person grief groups if you can. Everybody
Mhm.
doesn't have that access to it. Some people are not
Absolutely
in
not.
areas
It's
that do.
true.
The Great Freeze of 2020, as a friend of mine down under calls it changed a lot of the way things work. And a lot of people that would have never done were on Zoom here recording, even though people won't see the video, they're going to just hear
Mhm.
the audio. This has become normal. This is the way people see each other. It's the way meetings are
Totally.
held. And it's an amazing thing. Everybody got a little bit of Zoom burnout for a while after the Great Freeze because they felt like everything was happening on Zoom, and rightfully so. And I think that if you're lucky enough to be in, especially with you being in LA, you're in a pretty unique situation with how big of a metro that is, if it was New
Hmm.
York or something. But vast spaces of our country and even beyond our country, the world, are not as, I don't know whether to call it fortunate or unfortunate to not have the in-person groups
Couldn't agree more
at
with
their
you.
access. And for me, this being able to do an online community, and I curate them very carefully, and they're small, and it's regular, like weekly type of situations. And most of the women in the community that have invested in their own healing and invested in the community so that they can not only be upheld, but uphold others, most people have mostly all gone on to have time together in person. They've gone on to go to either a retreat or they've gone on to meet each other in nearby cities. Some of them go on vacation together now because they have become friends just from being online. So if you can form a good enough friend online to go on vacation with people, then there is something there. But then everybody always says there's just nothing like being in person. And that's true. But I say that Zoom allows us to curate a community that is that specific of these are your people. You didn't have to rely on just the people that were in your small community. And that's kind of like a crapshoot, right? You're going to hope that the lost parents in your area are going to be your people. but what if they aren't? And so for me to
Yeah.
curate this mom space of moms that are so close to each other, some of the magic is that we're able to do it from all over the place.
I
Both is important, I think.
No, I agree 100%. And Los Angeles is one of the few places that has a place called Our House. It's
Mm-hmm.
not a national organization. We're actually opening up a chapter in New York,
Oh,
but
good.
even large cities do not have this type of facility. So you're 100% right. I mean, doing a Zoom is still a lifeline to people. So I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really important. Time over time, it's the thing I've seen that makes the most difference to people. They still have to do the work,
Yes.
but it's about being witnessed and held and seen that makes all the difference in their ability to then have the motivation to say I can do this because I know that they did it and I know they're here, and if I need to crawl down in the pit they're going to get down in it with me, and it's just a whole different experience to be in community and grief and to be seen than it is to be isolated and trying to do it alone because you do think you're crazy.
Oh,
Siblings have a really hard time with that because they're unseen. They're the forgotten mourners a lot of times. And my son now facilitates a group for siblings. And they've now increased this year to twice a month because him and the two other ladies that co facilitate with him decided that once a month wasn't enough. And he has told me that he has gotten more from being in community with these other siblings than he could have ever imagined. He said, just somebody saying, "Oh, me too." And he said, "I thought I was crazy with some of it, Mom. I thought I was crazy."
well, it's validation, right?
Yeah.
You need
Yeah.
validation.
Yeah, we really do. Our whole human experience needs validation. So why would this not need it,
Mm.
right? So when was the book born in your mind?
Yeah, happy to talk about it. I started to write about Rob a month after he died. I started to blog about him every day. I wrote something. And the reason I did that was I wanted to document how my feelings might change. And because
Mm-hmm.
I'm an older guy, I didn't think I would remember specifically. So partly it was to document my feelings. And I decided I was going to write something every day for a year, which is what I did. I'm a writer, I'm an editor. I worked at Rolling Stone magazine, I worked at Men's Health. That was the way I knew how to
It
grieve.
was in your blood to just write. Yeah,
Very much
exactly.
so, very much so. And it was the way I grieved. And it was also a way to stay connected to Rob. And it was a way to be witnessed by others. So after a year, I took a lot of that raw material and I decided to sort of shape it into this book, A Space in the Heart, a survival guide for grieving parents. And the way I structured the book, it's in three parts. And part one is the end. And part one is it's the end of your life as you have known it. It's the end of your child's life, and it's that the devastation period. Part two is the middle, and the middle is the emotional journey of grief and how you're actually moving through it and all of the obstacles that are going to come your way. And I have some suggestions for some tools. And then part three is the beginning. And the beginning is integrating your grief into your life. And it's a phrase that I came up with. It's how you become an extraordinary parent. And if I can, I'll read something that explains what that means. You cool
Yeah, I
with
was going
that?
to say, as I look at the table of contents for your book, I am going, okay, we've got to go through this. And I want him to start reading little bits of it because this is phenomenal, you guys. There's so much wisdom here. So take it away, please
All
do.
right. So this piece is called We Are Extraordinary Parents. I've always found it strange that there's no word for a parent who loses a child. Why do widows, widowers, and orphans get to have all the fun? I think it's time for someone to right this wrong. Bear with me for a moment as I reaffirm what you already know. Children aren't supposed to die before their parents. That's just not the way life should work. We give birth to children or adopt them. We love and nurture them. We raise them. They grow up. We grow old, and then we die. The circle of life, sunrise, sunset, rinse and repeat. Choose your own metaphor. That's what every parent expects, And by and large, it's also the way things play out. Losing a child, no matter the circumstances, goes against the natural order of things. It's not part of the ordinary experience. It is something entirely different, and we become something entirely different. When your child is taken from you, you are no longer ordinary parents. Ordinary parents don't visit their child in a cemetery. Ordinary parents don't cry themselves to sleep at night. Ordinary parents don't wake up each morning knowing they'll never see their child again. We become extraordinary. We become the ones who are unlike the others. We become the newest members of the world's cruelest club, one that is already overcrowded and where the cost to join is the steepest price imaginable. We become those people, the tragic ones who are whispered about and pitied. We become the ones who are shattered, seemingly beyond repair. Remember Mary Tyler Moore and Ordinary People? That. But after a while, something strange takes place that's right out of a Marvel comic book. A metamorphosis occurs during our grief and mourning, transforming us from extraordinary to extraordinary. A lot happens when you close up the space between those two words. We are extraordinary parents, not in the sense that we are exceptionally good, which is what people usually mean when they use that adjective. But look it up and you'll find we are the very definition of the word. A, going beyond what is usual, regular, or customary. B, exceptional to a very marked extent. We are extraordinary parents who must go on living in the world with a hole in our heart. We are extraordinary parents who, in many cases, still love and care for our other children. We are extraordinary parents who go to work every day and function as human beings, while most people are unaware of our secret identities. We are extraordinary parents who feel things that no ordinary parent has ever felt, and we can endure the deepest pain because that has become one of our superpowers. And that's another notable thing about us. We all have different superpowers because each of us experiences our loss in our own particular way. Some of us have an unlimited capacity for compassion and forgiveness. Some of us become impervious to pain. Some of us are masters of disguise. Some of us can turn to stone. Some of us can become invisible. And then there are those of us who can open up and share it with the world. We walk among you. We are your friends and neighbors, your co-workers, the quiet couple who sat at the table next to you in a restaurant last night. We are the extraordinary parents, and we don't mind if you want to call us by our first name.
Thank you. I look forward to more. So as I'm looking at that, we are extraordinary parents. The way you did your book was the same way you did your story with, like you said, the end, the middle, and the beginning. And so that's a nice little part of your section in the end, which is how you start the book. Another Larry, Melissa commonality is you have the very next chapter labeled Stuck in Suck City. I use the term, gosh, what is it? I say it all the time, but now that I've read your phrase out loud,
It happens.
I always say sometimes you have to sit in the suck.
Totally.
And people are like, really? And I'm like, yeah, sometimes you have to sit in the suck. Now, it's about when you get stuck that there's a problem, right? So that's
right.
funny. That leads to the next part. But talk through so that there's an evolution that occurs in this book. How long did it take you to write?
I write fast. It took about 2 years. It took multiple shapes, but once I got that structure in place, I really, I think what makes it different than other grief books is it's not just a memoir. It's not just my story. It's really an emotional guide of what we go through. The first chapter of the book is called A Day in the Life, if you can still call it that. And it's brutal. It's a brutal chapter because I wanted to describe what we all feel in those first couple of days after losing a child. And it's raw and it's honest, and people read it and it hurts, but they know it's the real deal. And the whole book follows the emotions that I had, and I know that those emotions are universal. So people, when they read the book, have said that they see themselves on every page, and they also say that I'm able to articulate their feelings that they could never express themselves. And I got to tell you, I've heard from so many bereaved parents, and they tell me how much they love the book and how much it helped them. And it brings tears to my eyes every time because I don't know if people realize this. You don't make money writing these books. I didn't write this book to make $1 million. I'm not going to make any money. I wrote this book to help people like us, and then to hear that it's actually helping people. It's amazing to me. I get overwhelmed with love. I'm teary that people can't see, but it brings tears to my eyes because that's what I had intended. I just wanted to help others like us, and I see that it's helping.
Yeah, that's the reward. I had a cause to tell somebody that just this last week that, believe it or not, I haven't written a single book or published a single book because I do a project with moms that's 13 weeks. That's a healing narrative project that at the end, there's a chapter about their child that's published in an anthology book. And I've done that. I'm in the 6th volume of it right now. And I had somebody say something about making money off of these books. And I gently to myself laughed and then said, I don't do this to make money. It was never, ever my goal. And if it was, I would have been sadly let down. Until you get to a certain place in life. Yeah, if Oprah puts out a book, she might make money.
Exactly. That's
But the
it.
rest of the world isn't making money off of their books. And what you said, you don't write them to make money because it just isn't what's happening. I did it for the project. I did it for the guide, and the journals that I put out are done to help people and to be a part of the bigger picture of the help that I'm offering. And yeah, as I look through your chapter titles, I'm anxious to hear you read something else that you would honor us with. But I want to hear you speak on something, which is the 12
Yeah.
steps of grief, because I know we all know that there's an archaic version of the 5 steps of grief out there. And I mean,
Mhm.
first of all, to be fair, that was a bastardized thing that came from Elizabeth
Correct.
Kubler-Ross. That wasn't her intention.
Yeah, I
But
know.
then the mental health world snagged onto her in her work and decided to turn it into grief steps. Then they hung on to it for a couple of decades. I remember even when my dad died in the late 90s, we were getting handed books that were akin to, here's what you're going to need to go through when you grieve. And it was like, I think it was the 5 steps. And so I'm interested to
Yeah.
hear, would you at least address what that chapter's
Yeah,
about?
yeah. There's 2 chapters like that, and you're 100% right. The whole Elizabeth Kubler-Ross thing has been bastardized, and I write exactly about that. And then there's another chapter where I wrote, it's called Say Hello to My Sad Little Friends. And I actually have the stages as people talking. But the one you're referring to comes from 12-step programs. And it hit me one day that my wife is sober. I tried to get Rob into AA, and he went to a few meetings. He never really took to it. But I wrote about this because I really love the Serenity Prayer. And then I started to look at the AA Big Book and the principles behind it. And there were these 12 principles, and I sort of twisted them and applied them to grief. So I wasn't planning on reading it, but if you hang out a sec, let me find it in the book because I can just read like a little portion of it.
Yeah, I will. Let me know when you find it. I'll fill a little space in between, but
Okay.
I think that's amazing. I kind of thought that's where it was going to go because I don't need to be a sober person. That gene skipped me luckily, but I have a lot of that in my family, and I attended adult children. I attended Al-Anon. So I'm very familiar with all of the 12 steps. And like you, I love the Serenity Prayer. I think there's so much wisdom in it.
Mm.
And it's why it's lasted. That's why it's still going on. That's why there's coffee pots on doors all over the world now. And so go ahead if you found it. It looks like you
I
found it.
did. I did. I did. Let's see where to start. The steps are uniquely designed to help people get sober and recover, but the principles behind each of them, which come straight from the AA Big Book, are what really caught my attention. Being a writer, I started by looking at the key words associated with each of these principles: honesty, hope, faith, courage, integrity, willingness, humility, love, forgiveness, acceptance, awareness, service. Some pretty good ones there, right? Like the Kubler-Ross stages, some of them may make sense to you now, and some may make sense to you later. All I can tell you is how they made sense for me. Love was what it was all about from the moment I saw Rob's beautiful face when he was born to the end when he looked like he was peacefully asleep in his casket. I've never loved anyone the way I loved Rob, and I never will. Forgiveness followed. I forgave Rob for what he did because he was mentally ill, and I forgave myself for being unable to get a handle on his mental illness. Faith burst out of me from a previously unknown place in my heart. I had a strong belief that I'd somehow find the courage and willingness to face the scary grief beast until he finally said adios. Honesty, integrity, and awareness came naturally, not because I'm a saint, hardly, but rather because, as I've said before, Rob's death cracked me wide open, and I've remained open and present in the moment ever since. Humility is a given. Nothing humbles a person to their core more than the death of a child. Acceptance is sort of everything rolled up into one big sad enchilada. Accepting the unacceptable meant facing the reality of never seeing Rob again and learning to live with it. Service came as a huge surprise to me. I was never a servicey type of guy, but after deciding that I wanted to help other parents like us, I found it truly was and continues to be one of the most rewarding things I've ever done in my life. Hope is my second favorite word after love. Hope is everything. Hope keeps you going. Hope is what you need to get your arms around. Hope is what this book is all about.
I'm glad I had you read that one.
Perfect.
Things happen the way they're supposed to, right?
Absolutely. The universe
Yeah.
at work, right?
Well, and yeah, it was interesting because here I didn't even know that was in there. I'm lucky enough, y'all, to have a copy of this book, and I owe myself some beach time. And when I get some, this book is what's going with me because there's just so much about it. I just look through all the titles, but everything is going to be okay is something I say an awful lot. You don't have to necessarily read that chapter. I'd love to know where you're going to go next. But
Yeah.
I say everything is going to be okay. And then a comma and say, but maybe not today. And that's okay. Because we feel that way an awful lot as grievers. People say things like, it's all going to be okay. And that feels so. But then if you add on but maybe not today, we need to give people permission to know they need that hope. That hope is what you're talking about, is it will be okay. And it's okay if it isn't right now.
Totally. It's the most important thing. It's the most important thing. And I think there's hope on every page of the book, but particularly early on, you know how hopeless people are. And they're just in the dark and they cannot see any light possible. And even when you try to give them hopeful words, they can't even take it in the beginning. But it plants a seed. It just plants a seed that things will change. And because we know grief constantly changes. And at some point, the light breaks through. And then at some point, and this is one of the chapters in the third part of the book, you experience the return of joy. And when that happens, you've been transformed.
I talked about chasing joy for a long time because hope had started to eke its way in. You talk about the first 2 years being so hard, and it's true. And so when people get to year two, and year two carries this bad rep of being worse than year one, and that's discouraging for a new griever to hear, how could this possibly get worse? And so I say, it's not worse. Nothing's worse than when they died. You're decimated. But it becomes sharper. It's more brutal in a lot of ways, but it's because the clouds left. The shock is worn off. And I often say it's if you ripped off a bandage and you hadn't let that wound air out at all or anything, and you suddenly have exposed all those nerve endings, that bandage is the first year shock that's been ripped off. And now, whoa, that hurts like you can't believe. And so that second year is brutal. And so when people are in the throes of the beginning part and even into the middle of that second year, And they're like, where's the hope? I said, hang on, it's coming, because everybody's timeline's slightly different. And I know there's people that put their grief in a box and walk away from it for a while. So there is no linear. But as you're working through your grief, there's going to become a point, if you're working through it in that second year, especially towards the end, that I almost universally start to see hope come out. And hope is coming out because joy is starting to eke back in a little bit. They caught themselves laughing. They caught themselves feeling a little bit of joy. And my husband and I sold everything, businesses, our home and everything, and bought a giant motor coach and traveled for a couple of years after Alex had been gone for 18 months. We started the process. So by around year 2, we were on the road. And that was what I talk about. I say I was looking for joy. I didn't know where it was. I knew it was out there. I knew it wasn't literally out there, but it was my metaphorical journey that became real to say, I know joy's still out there. I've got to find it. And it's because hope had showed up. Hope had showed up. So I knew that I could find joy. It was quite an interesting winding road, literally and figuratively, that I took myself and drugged my husband. I didn't drag him. He went very willingly. But yeah, to hear you say that's even so interesting, because it's just, this is what we see happen in this journey. And it's others that are going through it that give us those first seeds of, I don't know whether I can get there, but they're there. So maybe I can. I looked in the eyes of a grieving mom for the first time 2 months after Alex died at an AFSP walk, that I felt like I got drugged too. Because even though I knew it was for a good purpose, at 2 months in, I was lucky to still be like getting out of bed and brushing my teeth and whatever. So to have to show up at a walk wasn't on my list of priorities, but I did it. My daughter had put the team together, and that was where I met the first mom. Somebody drugged me to her and said, I need you to meet this person. She was 3 years in. And the moment I looked up and looked in her eyes, a seed was planted that took years to do something with. But in that moment, I knew that's where the transformation was going to start, was with connection to other parents, because you need to see that you can survive this in the early days. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think there's one other point for joy, and I think this comes up a whole bunch, and that is particularly maybe in year 2 for a lot of us, you realize that you have to make a choice here in how you want to move forward in your grief. It doesn't just automatically happen. Certainly, we have to put in the work, but when you get into the fork in the road of where you want to go with your grief, and you have to make a choice that you want to be on that path to joy. You have to open yourself up to that and really sort of work at it. And people in the beginning, as you remember, there's no choice in anything. We didn't know we had choices. We're just suffering. It's pure hell, and we're suffering. And then all of a sudden, we're suffering a little less, and you have to make a choice of how you want to move forward with your grief. And you can stay with the suffering, as a lot of people do, because they think the suffering keeps them connected to their child. But we know that you're always connected with your child. Your child lives right here in your heart, and that's never going to change, but you don't have to walk around with all of the suffering. And that's another choice that we make.
Again, not a surprise, Larry, although I've heard so many more with you than I have anybody else, but I preach on choice all the time. And I know if some people it's a little too prickly for, because they think the same thing. This wasn't a choice. I didn't choose this. Well, that's true. But now you get to choose how you respond to it.
That's
and
right.
you get patted on the back and they're like, honey, it's okay. Time will heal your wound. And I always say, bullshit. Time doesn't do anything but pass. It's what you do with the time that matters.
It's the work.
You have to make a choice to dig in and say, I'm going to decide whether I sit down and sit in Suck City, or whether I get up and figure out what I'm going to do about this. I felt like I obviously had a choice, but it felt like a non-choice to say, I've got to figure out how to live with this, because otherwise it will take me. Meaning, inside, I was dying a slow death of my soul and spirit and my health, because my body was keeping the score, even though I wasn't. And 3.5 years in, I had luckily only a minor stroke, but I had a minor stroke. And that was my wake up call. That was when I realized I wanted to live. And I thought, oh no. And I had this feeling of panic, and I thought, I don't want to die. I want to live. but I need to figure out how to live with meaning and
And you
purpose.
did.
And yeah, it was a
You
wake up
know,
call, and I had to make a whole lot of choices, and it
mhm.
does. And the choice wasn't the hard part. The hard part came afterwards, but you just keep making them, and you do it with other people, and it gets easier. So where would you like to go now? Because I'd like you to do at least read another passage or two if you would be willing.
Yeah, let's do that. By the way, we are so on the same page in terms of how we live in the world. And I think there's a lot of people like us, and I think the book almost sort of reminds them of who they are a little bit. Like, I don't think we're special or exceptional,
Agree.
but I think people maybe need to be reminded, particularly early on, because you
Mhm.
just sort of can't see the forest for the trees. Let me
100%.
see what else I have that could be. Oh, I got one. All right. It's a tiny bit heavy, but I think it'll resonate. This is called Parts of You. One part of you knows that you must go on with your life, while another part doesn't ever want to get out of bed. One part of you feels like you did everything possible to save your child, while another part takes you to task for not having done enough. One part of you believes that you were the best parent the child could ever have, while another part questions how you could possibly be the best parent when you failed to keep your child alive. One part of you accepts the reality of your loss, while another part remains lost in disbelief. One part of you acknowledges that love never dies and that grief lasts a lifetime, while another part wonders how you could possibly continue to live like this. One part of you understands that enduring the worst thing that could ever happen to a parent makes you a stronger person, while another part asks, how can you be stronger when a piece of you is missing and can never be replaced? One part of you has begun to process your grief by facing what scares you the most, while another part simply ignores it. One part of you has stopped crying all the time and feels a tiny bit better, while another part suffers an intense sadness that will never go away. One part of you doesn't allow the loss to define you, while another part feels like the poster child for bereaved parents who are endlessly pitied. One part of you is slowly letting go of denial, guilt, anger, and fear, while another part is drowning in an ocean of sorrow. One part of you has been able to experience joy again, however short lived, while another part feels terribly guilty about it. One part of you has become a warrior, while another part is exhausted and ready to give up. One part of you is hopeful that you'll survive your tragic loss, as so many have before you, while another part is certain that nobody has ever experienced the depth of pain you're living through. One part of you is certain that nothing can ever hurt you again, while another part is an open wound that will never heal. One part of you takes great comfort in your faith, while another part admonishes God for taking away the most cherished gift he ever gave to you. One part of you is becoming yourself again, while another part feels that the best part of yourself is gone forever. One part of you has stopped torturing yourself by asking unanswerable questions, while another part stays up all night trying to answer them in vain. One part of you needs to be strong for your other children, while another part secretly fears for their lives. One part of you has changed and evolved with your grief, while another part is scared that if you change too much, you'll lose the connection with your child. One part of you senses that what you're feeling is exactly what you should be feeling, and that you'll feel differently in the future, while another part views the future as meaningless. One part of you realizes that juggling all those complex and paradoxical feelings is just part of the grieving process, that you can hold opposing thoughts at the same time, while another part, after making a fuss, reluctantly agrees. One part of you concedes that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, while another part still wonders how to become whole again.
The choice that you made to do this book is a good one. And I know it's a good one for everybody that will read it. But I also know what you said is true. It's done you probably far more good than it could ever do anybody else, right? I say that not lightly because that doesn't mean I'm diminishing what it does for others. But you said something about that earlier, that this work gives back to you over and over again. And that's what I tell people when they say, thank you so much for the spaces you provide. Thank you for all these things. This is amazing. And I say, I get so much more from this than you ever could. All I'm doing is providing a space. You're showing up doing the work, right? And it's my honor to hold the space.
The words right out of my mouth.
Right.
Honor and privilege to work with people like us.
100%. That's how I feel. Yeah, it's exactly it.
They're all people. They're all people.
Yeah.
And
And that lends itself to what you said earlier. And it makes me think of your chapter about the soul knows when to go that you talked about earlier. I have come to the place to understand in my core. It doesn't mean I don't hate it, but I understand and believe that Alex was meant to be here for the time he was here. This was the journey. This was also my journey. I just didn't know. It was my journey to do this work with him and to do this work in his honor. And it's the greatest gift I could ever have had that I never in a million years would have wanted or wished on anybody. It's such a duality there. I talk about dualities a lot on the podcast because I cannot imagine now not knowing some of the most incredible humans I've ever met in my life.
Me too. Same exact thing.
I freaking wish I didn't have this reason to ever know them.
I know.
I would go back to being a more shallow human being if I could have him back, but that wasn't our journey. Our journey was this, and I now see the great glory in the work that he is doing beyond his life, and that I have the privilege to do next to him and with him in spirit, and all these other incredible souls doing such great things too from their pain that they could have chosen not to do. We could, as you said, we could have all chosen not to. As we inch a little closer to wrapping things up, because we could just do this endlessly, I'm sure. Where would you like to go in the book at this point? Because I feel like we're just going to do a little, I am back to the table of contents, but I think that
if you want to pick one, I'm happy. Otherwise.
Well, I feel like a really good place to go into part 3, because this is something that many people in the community talk about. You have how psychedelics helped heal my broken heart. This is an interesting chapter that some people might be like, I'm not talking to him about that chapter. I'm leaning into it going, whether this is not something I would have ever thought about before either, but the amount of moms in my world that have found relief in things that they would have never turned to before.
Totally.
That have helped them with the expansiveness and the healing capacity within our own body. And many of them probably don't talk about it outside of their healing spaces. So in some ways, for people to hear about it from somebody else and to hear this talked about, I feel like plant medicine is, they kind of still have it in the closet with even suicide stigma, like, hey, if you want to do that, but let's not talk about it. Why?
Also, I think people think about it as a recreational thing that they did when they were young. They did shrooms and it was great and all that. That's not what this is. This is very therapeutic. I'll give you the short version. And the short version is that I had amplified death anxiety before Rob even passed. When I thought about my own death, it freaked me the hell out, and it was really pronounced. And I stumbled upon watching a Netflix documentary called Fantastic Fungi, which was all about that. And they were interviewing cancer patients, and the cancer patients were all talking about how their death anxiety had vanished after they did psilocybin mushrooms. I decided I needed to do that. And that was the primary reason. And the secondary reason was maybe I could also somehow be in touch with Rob's spirit. So to make a long story short, I hit the magic mushroom jackpot. Not the first time, the second time I did it. And I was sitting under a tree and I was facing a Buddha, and the Buddha started to change. And all of a sudden the face of the Buddha changed, and I saw what I immediately recognized as Rob, but He didn't look like Rob at all. He looked like an old man. He was wearing John Lennon glasses. He was wearing a beanie. He had feline features, but I recognized it immediately as Rob's spirit. And it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen in my life. And it started to grow and light up. And I was sitting there crying and I was saying, "You're so beautiful. You're so beautiful." And it was amazing. So that was the first part of that journey. Then I underwent this thing called an ego dissolution, where it felt like what I saw th- was myself breaking up into puzzle pieces and then vanishing. And then I was in this buzzy white space. And as I'm telling you this, I realize how crazy it all sounds, but you're literally on another plane of consciousness. And a little bit, it's also what you choose to believe. So that happened. I saw my parents' spirits. I saw my own spirit as a warrior. So I hit the magic mushroom jackpot. And what I tell bereaved parents and why I think it's so important for them to try this is that wouldn't you want to do something that will provide some comfort, that will connect you with your child? And you're not necessarily going to have this jackpot of a trip that I had, but everyone that has done this has a profound, sometimes transformative experience. And it's a healing, it's just another way of healing. And even if people haven't lost a child, when I think you've reached a certain age and you haven't done this, like I said, I've never had a transformative experience. And losing Rob was transformative, but not in a way I would have liked. This was my first of many now deeply spiritual, deeply profound, deeply transformative experiences. And I think anyone who has suffered any sort of trauma should really. And the thing about this is lots of people are just scared to do it. And I always say, if you're not scared, there's something wrong with you. You should be scared, but it's about facing that fear and then what happens afterwards. And you wind up surprising yourself and you wind up having, in many cases, just an unbelievable experience. So that's the short version of psychedelics, but I've gone on many of them, and each of them, it's their own thing. And I don't always see Rob's spirit, but I always come out with some surprising, profound insight.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I just thought it was interesting because I know it is a common space that a lot of people are either curious about or they've experienced some on their own. And again, it takes a while for sometimes moms to open up and say, "Oh, yeah, I've been doing ketamine or I've done psilocybin or I would like to do this and I'm scared," and do it in a way that makes sense. Find a
Well, it's called,
practitioner, do the things in a right
exactly.
way, go to a retreat or a facility or whatever. But besides that, what do you have to lose by potentially having a transformative
That's what I,
soul? Why is it that we so clearly can pour the bourbon glass after glass or whatever our potion is, but we're so terrified to do something? It's because we're afraid. We're afraid of what we don't know.
all of it.
All of the things, yeah.
I think
And it's
also afraid of letting go. And I think
100%.
once you let go, amazing things can happen, but it's scary. It's
Right.
scary.
Yeah. So I would love for you, I know you have a piece that you want to read to end. Are you at that place or would you like to? Everybody that's listening, if you don't know, I have very involved show notes. So any of the links, all of the things will be in the show notes, all the ways to find Larry, to get his book, to find his groups, all of that will be in the show notes. I'm also going to add a couple things to my resource page. Everybody buy this book. And where do you want to go, Larry?
Let's end on this little
Okay,
hopeful note.
perfect.
It's called a little
Perfect.
reminder. Here's a little reminder of an important thing that often gets lost in the grief sauce. It's simply this: there is always hope. It's hard to see sometimes. The sadness blinds us, but hope is always right there with you. All you have to do is reach out for it. Whenever you're having a really bad day, wrap your arms around it and don't let go. And it doesn't hurt to also hold on to it on the not so bad days as well. Let hope guide you. Hope is the light in the darkness. Whatever you're feeling right now will pass. Things will get better and then they'll get worse. and then they'll get better again. You know the drill. You've been on the exhausting grief ride for what feels like forever, but it's not forever. And as long as you have hope in your heart, everything is going to be okay because hope is everything. Hope makes you look forward to the next day. Hope heals your heart. As Rob would say, hope is dope.
Larry, thank you. Thank you for reading. Thank you for wanting to have this conversation and showing up and making it such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's really my pleasure. You made it very easy. Just a joy to talk to you, Melissa.
Likewise, sir. I hope we'll talk soon.
Too. Thanks. Take care.
Bye. So thank you for joining me today, Grievers. If today's episode resonated with you, please consider subscribing to get weekly updates when I drop new episodes. And please take a moment to rate and review the podcast with 5 stars, especially on Apple Podcasts. Your support helps so much because it's how others are able to find the podcast and this community. Remember, though it may feel impossible now, hope and healing are within reach. I invite you to connect further by visiting my website, theleftoverpieces.com, where you'll find support, legacy options, retreats, resources, online Zoom groups, and so much more. Together, we can navigate this journey of healing. We can put our hearts, our leftover pieces, back together. And as they say here in Puerto Rico, poco a poco, juntas podemos. Little by little, together we can. Take care and talk soon.